So before we do get started with answering questions and stuff like that, I did just want to start by saying thank you all for for showing up to a random 8:30 a.m. at least for me live stream, and I didn't realize until I woke up that it is a holiday, at least in the U.S. So I know a lot of people in the U.S. are sleeping and whatnot, and some people are at work, and it's weird times around the world. So appreciate people tuning in for this, and also for watching the channel for the last few years, whether you've been here since day one, the first video I uploaded, or you subscribed yesterday. Appreciate you all. It's still pretty crazy to me that like making videos online is my job now. So yeah, super appreciative. And yeah, let's answer some questions. So I think what I'm going to do is start with questions people asked beforehand, and then I'll go back through the chat and answer all of the questions that y'all have asked so far. So let's see. Let's see if I can actually like share my screen onto here. So I am not an expert in the live streaming things. All right, select window. This one. There we go. All right. Let's see, I don't know how I feel about. Yeah, I think that's better. Let's get rid of this banner. And then all right. Good enough. All right. So let's come into here. These are the questions y'all asked. I'll make this even bigger. All right. So let's just go through them. All right. First one, I have a question for you. Would you advise someone in high school that they want to study, or what would you advise someone in high school that wants to study computer science? What can they do now that will benefit them later? Like, what should they learn or focus on, knowing they have some time right now? Cool. So I get this question a lot, actually. I'm always surprised how many people watch my channel are in high school or in some similar positions, just like early on. So with high school specifically, and you say you want to study computer science, so I'm assuming you mean by that you are planning to go to university. So frankly, the most important part of high school, and the thing in high school that I think is the best predictor of success later on, is just what universities you get into and where you're able to go. So honestly, I think the most important thing is just getting good grades in high school and doing well on the SAT or ACT if you're in the US, or whatever standardized testing you have wherever you are. And a big part of that, people think of them as sort of like intelligence tests, and they're not. They are very studyable tests that you can do significantly better on if you just take the time to study. And that doesn't mean you have to go to some like super expensive SAT prep camp thing. Like, there's tons of ways to study for them online and get way, way better at taking those tests. So do that. Try to get into whatever the best university is that you can possibly get into. Get the best grades you can and all of that. Now, that part aside, what can you actually be doing computer science wise? First, I would recognize that university is there to teach you, right? Like, we don't go to university as like a career fair. We go to university to learn a new thing, not to prove that we already know a thing. So don't feel like you have to go in already knowing how to code, knowing computer science and all of that. But if you do want to get sort of a bit of a head start, if your school offers it, take AP Computer Science or whatever computer science classes they offer. Even if they don't, you can try going through some of that material online. You could try going through some online courses. There's tons of free ones on YouTube that I'd probably start with. What like language to start with or any of that doesn't really matter too much. If you know what school you'll be going to, go to their intro classes and see what language they teach those in, and I'd probably start with that. But if you don't, AP Computer Science, I think, uses Java, but you can start with Java, or you could go the route of starting with like Python or JavaScript. Just like learning the basics somewhere can be good. But again, don't feel like you need to. The most important thing to focus on in high school is just getting good grades, getting into a good university, because that is the most important predictor of success. Not to say that like, oh, if you don't go to Stanford or Harvard, you'll never get a job. That's not true. But I do just think it's the most important thing to focus on when you're in high school is doing well in high school. And then when you're in college, you can focus on doing well in college. Yeah, cool. And I appreciate the kind words as well. All right. Congrats, Connor. Subbed a while back from the Primogen doing your tough JS quiz. Question, how do I stand out in tech interviews? Is it more desirable to be a full stack or really skilled in either back end or front end? asking as a college student looking to get into the industry soon. Okay, so sort of two questions here. So one, how do I stand out in tech interviews? So people think a lot of times about tech interviews as being this like test, right? Like they think of it similar to the SAT we just talked about, where you go in and you take this test, and if you do well enough on the test and the SAT, you'll get into a good school. On the coding interview, you'll get a good job. And there is like some truth to that, right? But it's not entirely true, because it's not just a test. It is a collaborative process with that interviewer. And of course, you have to be good enough at the coding interviews and actually be getting questions right to get a job. Like that's sort of a given. However, I think the standing out part, as far as like how to stand out amongst a bunch of people who all got the question right, is all about communication. So a lot of people think about it sort of like a test. So they study like they study for tests, but it's not that. It is more like studying for a presentation, right? It's preparing for a presentation. So practice in that way. So as you're studying for these coding interviews, actually practice saying things out loud and going through the like the process of solving that question in like a verbal way, in a way that makes sense with how you'll be doing it with that interviewer. So I think that's the most important thing. Just focus on the communication aspect of it. Is it more desirable to be full stack or really skilled in backend or front end? I think it depends what you're applying, but also I'd say just like do the thing that's most interesting to you rather than what might be the absolute most desirable thing in the industry. But which one is more desired, to answer your question? At like startups in places where they kind of expect you to be doing a little bit of everything, full stack developers are probably more sought after. At the bigger tech companies, I don't think that's the case, and I don't think it really matters. Yeah. All right, how about this? Let's go back and forth between questions from there and the chat, so that I'm not just like leaving y'all unanswered. All right, so I'll go with this one first because there's the first question. Tell me about your journey and many more. So thanks for the congratulations. I do have a video. It's like I think the second video on my channel that is like how I became a Facebook software engineer, and that sort of tells most of the story. But I'll just say I took AP Computer Science. I liked it. I guess before that I did robotics in like middle school and sort of got a little bit of intro to techie stuff, and then took AP Computer Science. Liked it. I went to the University of Washington. Go Dogs, by the way. Our team's not great this year, but went to University of Washington. I did internships at Facebook and Lyft. I also was a teaching assistant for web development there. And then I went to Facebook full time. I worked there for about a year. Left Facebook to join Algo Expert and build the Front End Expert platform. And then when we launched Front End Expert, I started this YouTube channel. And it was sort of, in a way, like a passion project, but also a way to help market Front End Expert. And then sort of as time went on, the YouTube channel became like my full-time thing, and Front End Expert kind of became a side thing. It still is there, and people still use it all the time, but my main focus at this point is YouTube. Yeah. Cool. Let's see. Congrats. Appreciate it. Love, brother. Appreciate it. Congratulations. Congrats. Appreciate it, everybody. Let's see. This is about the vertical stuff. Let's pass that. How bad? Oh, this is about the vertical streaming too. All right, let's go to this one. Thoughts on 10 coding bootcamp. So I know literally nothing about this specific coding bootcamp. I've frankly never even heard of it. That's not to say it's good or bad. I just don't know anything about it. That would probably be my answer for like 90% of coding bootcamps, is that I've never heard of them. But what I'll say is this about coding bootcamps in general. The red flags I would look out for is if they're making like promises that seem too good to be true, right? Like if they're saying in 6 weeks you're going to get a job at Google, no, you're not. Not going to happen. Flat out, not the truth. If they're making these false promises, if they're saying they have a 100% job placement rate within 2 months of graduation, frankly, Stanford doesn't have that right now. So like, not true, right? Like flat out, just a lie. So if they're making claims like that, not good. I'm not saying they are. Again, never heard of them. Just saying coding bootcamps in general, look for red flags like that. And then beyond that, what I would say is one, look at their curriculum. Say, like, does it seem interesting to you? Which I know is hard to sort of gauge when you're like, I haven't written code before, so how do I know if this is a good curriculum? But just see if it seems reasonable to you. And then also go to LinkedIn and see if you can find some of their alumni and see what their alumni are doing. Are they doing the things you want to be doing? If they are, great. That's probably a good path. If none of them are, that's probably not a good path. And one red flag with that I would look for is if you see a bunch of alumni who all work for the coding bootcamp, that's not necessarily bad, right? Like there's nothing wrong with that in the same way that like I went to University of Washington. If I got a job at UW after I graduated, there's nothing wrong with that. But if that's what like 90% of the people you're finding are doing, that's probably a sign that they're sort of inflating their job placement rate by just hiring the people that they just taught. And then it just becomes a cycle where they teach people and then they hire them as like a teaching assistant to teach more people to be hired as teaching assistants, but nobody's actually making it to the actual industry. And I have seen that happen with a few coding bootcamps. So if you see that, another red flag. But generally speaking, look at the curriculum, look at the website, make sure it's not making ridiculous claims, and then look to the alumni and see if they're doing things that are aligned with what you want to do. And especially alumni who graduated recently, because somebody who graduated in like 2019 is going to have a very different experience finding a job than you will, just because the market is so much different. All right. Congrats on 100K subs. Can you give me advice on how to get a software engineering job from Africa to, I don't know what the ... means. But if you're asking how to get a job, like if you are in Africa and you want to get a job in the US or somewhere else, I don't really know the answer to that because I've never even stepped foot on the continent of Africa. So it's hard for me to give advice on that. And just like generally speaking, if you're asking how to get a remote job in the US, or if you're asking how to get a job in the US and move here, or maybe it's not the US, maybe the ... is somewhere else. But if you're asking how to get a job internationally, again, not something I've ever done before, so I'm not really comfortable trying to answer that. And generally, advice for how to get a software engineering job, I would say focus on a few things. One, make your resume the best document you've ever made in your entire life. It should be as perfect as you can, get as much feedback as you can, and like actual critical feedback. It's not like the type of feedback your mom will give where she's like, "This is amazing, honey." Like, get like actual good, like solid critical feedback telling you the things that aren't good, especially from people who are already in the industry. So if you have access to those people, utilize them, get good feedback. And then if you can, work on some projects. Again, get good feedback on them, try to make them at least somewhat unique, somewhat interesting, something you can talk about in interviews, and then study for coding interviews and get extremely good at them. So this is going to be getting good at algorithms and data structures, and then also getting good at that communication aspect of the interviews that we talked about a little bit earlier. All right. Let's go to a couple more questions from the pre-done questions, because we do need to get through these. All right. So let's see. Congratulations. Appreciate it. Congratulations. Happy for you. Congrats. What kind of projects do you recommend to get my first job and stand out from the crowd so that recruiters will call me for an interview? Okay, so this kind of aligns with what we were just talking about. So projects do I recommend? Well, first of all, I would say like the projects you actually work on don't matter that much. It's more about doing them than it is about like the specific thing you do. Because frankly, most projects kind of fall in the same boat of like, they've seen it before, right? Like the recruiters have seen every project, not like literally every project, but it's pretty rare that they're going to see a project and be like, wow, that is cool and unique. So the majority of projects are going to fall in this realm of like, do the skills they used for this project align with the skills I've been told to recruit for? So that's sort of the first thing. You just focus on like something that's going to help you learn and something that is going to involve the skills that are going to be involved in the jobs you're applying for. But if you do want to try to stand out even more, try to find something that is actually unique. And I think a lot of people sort of bite off more than they can chew with this, and they go for something that is so incredibly unique that it's impossible to finish, right? Like they have this amazing startup idea that they've been thinking about for years and now that they've been coding for 6 months, they want to try to build it and use that as their project. That's not going to happen, right? Like there's or it probably won't happen, at least. It depends what that idea is, but there's a reason that startups raise a lot of money and hire a lot of developers, because they're usually complicated projects. So make sure it's something that's like in scope that you can actually do. And try to avoid things that are just straight from tutorials. So like if you Google best Python projects and then you do the best one or the first one, it's probably one they've seen 100 times. Now, maybe use that as a starting point and then do something else unique with it. Take it like that extra mile, but don't just use some project from some tutorial because they've seen it before. All right. What person's skill requires to be eligible? So what skills are required to be able to work as a React web developer? I mean, it depends on what company it is, but generally speaking, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React is, I think, sort of the answer to that. I'm confused about how to develop a desktop app. That's kind of interesting. So I'm probably not the best person to ask about this because I haven't really made many desktop apps, but I'll say this, there's a few options. So it's kind of similar to mobile development in that you have to first figure out like, what exactly am I trying to do here? So if like a mobile, if you want to make an iOS app, it's different than making an Android app, and it's different than if you want to make something that's going to be cross-platform. And on desktop, we have to build for Windows, we have to build for Mac, and potentially we have to build for Linux and maybe some other stuff if you want to do that. So that's sort of the first point, is like figure out that. And then there's the question of like, what exactly is this desktop app? Is it a like productivity type of app, or is it like a game or something else, right? And does it need to interface with different things in the operating system, or does it not? All of these things are going to sort of indicate what routes you can and can't go, right? So like, for example, if it's a game that you're trying to build, you'll want to use like a game engine like Unity or Unreal Engine or something like that. If it's a application that needs to interface with a ton of different aspects of the operating system itself, you'll probably need to use the tools built by that operating system and build it individually for that operating system. So like on Windows, I would imagine that'd be like using .NET, I think. Honestly, I haven't built a Windows app in like a decade, so I don't even know if that's accurate, but I'm assuming that's probably the route. And if you're not too worried about interfacing deeply with everything in the operating system and you're not making like a game, then there's a lot of routes. You could go the route of like Electron, and that would allow you to use the web technology, but build it as a desktop application. And that's oftentimes a lot easier than doing it sort of the pure native way of something like using whatever the like Apple kit thing is, Swift or whatever you have to use to build a like Mac app these days. Honestly, I've never made a Mac app in my life. I'm assuming it's similar to iOS. And it's going to be a lot easier than that. It's going to be easier than .NET probably if you're able to use something like Electron. But again, it's going to depend on what exactly the requirements are of your app. So start with requirements gathering and figure out from there what the best like actual route's going to be. Do you have any open jobs? I don't. People ask me this a lot. I don't know. I don't know if they're referring to like algo expert, or if they refer, in which case I have no control over anything whatsoever, or if they're referring to like me personally, in which case I make silly videos on the internet, so I don't have any developer jobs. How to get really good at backend, and I see that y'all can't even see that one. Hold on. Nope, not that. Not that either. All right, well, trust me, bro. It says how to get really good at backend. I don't even know that I would say that I am really good at backend. So I don't know if I'm the best person to ask about that. But with any skill, I'd say it's just repetition. Do it a lot. Do a lot of backend development, and you'll get better at it over time. Build projects that are progressively bigger and bigger. One thing I like to do a lot is go to some tutorial, some free tutorial. Go find your favorite Tech with Tim tutorial and follow it. Get to the end of it, and then after that, build something on top of it that he didn't build in that video. I think that's a good sort of route to go. Yeah. All right, let's go through some more questions on here. So I need a job, bro. I cannot really help with that, but good luck. Let's see. Is it possible to work without a degree? Possible, yes. Likely, less likely than with a degree. So first of all, there's a distinction here. So there's, is it possible to work in the industry? And I'm assuming you mean as a software engineer. So there's, is it possible to work with no degree? And then there's, is it possible to work with no computer science or related degree? And both the answer is yes, but with no degree whatsoever, if you go to like a coding boot camp, it's going to be, I think, somewhat reasonable, although still less likely than with a degree in computer science, of course. If you have a degree in something that's not computer science, so if you have like an English degree or something, that actually will help a little bit compared to just having no degree whatsoever, because some companies are still sort of stuck in the past of like, you need a degree to get a job here. So it can help to just have like any degree. But like, do you need a degree? No. Will having a random degree help a tiny bit? Will having a computer science degree help a ton? But I would say sort of the tiers are like computer science degree is going to be the easiest, or some other related degree, software engineering, informatics, even like applied mathematics, something like that. And then it's going to be like coding boot camp and some random degree. And then it'd be like coding boot camp and no degree. And then it'd be like no coding boot camp and random degree. And then like the hardest tier to get a job would be no coding boot camp and no degree. And even that is possible. I've met a few people like that, but it's very unlikely. And it's not necessarily a route I would recommend for pretty much anybody, because I don't think it's really a guaranteed path. Okay. I have 2 years of full stack MERN with Next.js, and I can't get work. I'm in Turkey. And then they also said, is English speaking important for work? Because I can just write English, but hard to talk. So as far as like getting a job in Turkey, it's hard for me to answer that. I've never even been to the country. So yeah, I don't have a ton to say for that. As far as English speaking, I think it depends on where you're working. If you're working in Turkey, I would imagine it's probably not that important. If you're trying to get like a remote job from the US or somewhere that's English speaking, it's probably going to be very important. So yeah, I think it just depends. Though I will say I have worked with people before who English was not their first language, and they would probably tell you the same thing of how they're not a great communicator in English. And that was never an actual barrier, like in working with them. So I would say you probably are much better at English than you think you are. Shout out to Mark. I appreciate it for the. I don't know what currency that is. So I have no idea if this is like 2 cents or $2 million. But I appreciate you, Mark. I learned a lot from you, Connor. Thank you for all your content. You all do not need to donate, but I greatly appreciate it. All right, let's see. Where were we? Congratulations. Appreciate that. Is it possible to switch from an insurance role to a developer role? I mean, possible, yes. Will you be able to like get hired at whatever insurance company and then 6 months later be like, I would like to be a software developer now? No, probably not, unless you like have that skill set. But is it possible to currently be working in the insurance industry and then go to a coding bootcamp or go get a CS degree or even self-teach and then go get a job as a developer? Yeah, absolutely. Now, will your previous experience working in insurance help with that job of becoming a developer? No, not really. I mean, other than just like showing that you've been able to hold a job. So it's sort of just a full-on career switch, but it's possible. It's just going to take time to build the skill set. And then once you've built the skill set, it's going to take time again to actually get the job. But I mean, it is possible. All right. Congratulations. Appreciate it. What, in your view, are the most essential data structures and algorithms to prepare for a big tech internship interview? That's a good question. So I have some videos on this that might be more complete than me answering it off the top of my head. But I would say, so data structures wise, if you count them as a data structure, it's going to be strings and arrays are going to be by far the most common types of questions you actually get, even though they are the simplest. And then you're going to need to know, on top of that, linked lists are pretty common, trees are pretty common, graphs are somewhat common in internships. I think they are less common than full-time interviews, but they do come up. I got some graph questions as an intern. And then stacks, queues, sets or maps or hash maps specifically. I think that's probably about it. There's other things that can be important, right? Like, or that can come up, but they're not that important. So, for example, specific types of trees, so like heaps or like AVL trees, things like that can come up, but they don't come up very often. So I wouldn't focus on them. And in terms of algorithms, I would say the most important two algorithms to know are BFS and DFS, so breadth first search and depth first search. And then I would say with linked lists, know how to do some of the common algorithms like reversing a linked list, and know how to do like different like two-pointer algorithms and like sliding window type algorithms. And then I would say dynamic programming can be important, but interns don't tend to be asked dynamic programming questions too often. I think they're getting less popular in general. Let's see, what else? Other types. I mean, there's other algorithms to know, of course, like with graphs, like Dijkstra's algorithm can come up from time to time. I think I had a question with it. But it's less about like memorizing every possible algorithm. I think the data structure side is more important than the algorithm side, because there's not that often that you get a question that's just like an implementation of like Dijkstra's algorithm. I think other than like the core ones of like BFS, DFS, it's not that important to like have a ton of different algorithms memorized. Yeah, there's probably a few others, but hopefully that's a good starting point. Advice on getting a job in the US if you just graduated from a coding bootcamp. Hey, so congrats on finishing that. So first of all, I would say just like, no, it's going to be kind of hard, like straight up, especially right now. But advice I would give is, one, work on your resume as much as you can, get as much feedback on it as you can from people inside and outside of that coding bootcamp. No matter how good you think your resume is, it's not that good. I've made videos of my old resumes, the ones that I thought were amazing as I was writing them, and looking back, they were terrible. So make your resume as good as you can, get as much feedback on it as you can, and then study as much as you can for coding interviews, get as good at them as you possibly can. For coding bootcamp people specifically, I think projects tend to be pretty important. So try to have some at least somewhat unique projects. I always sort of say it's kind of hard to get all that unique in your projects. Like recruiters have seen them all, but just don't have like the super generic projects that everybody from your coding bootcamp did. Like at least do something a little bit unique. And then play the numbers game a bit. Some people disagree with this, but my opinion has always been like, if you apply to one job, the odds you get that job, I don't know, maybe 10%, 5%, 1%, who knows? But the odds of getting that job, pretty low. But if you apply to 1 million jobs and each one of those jobs has a 1% chance, I don't remember how to do the math on that, but your odds are effectively 100%, right? I'm not saying to apply to 1 million jobs. And of course, I'm not saying to apply to one job, but just apply to a lot. So don't feel like you should, or don't take the approach of finding only the jobs that you think you are perfectly qualified for and that seem like the perfect fit. Just apply to all of them and see which ones stick, see which ones you're able to get, and then you can make the decisions from there. Even if that first job you get isn't one that's perfect for you, getting that first job is going to help you get the foot in the door. And then even if 6 months, a year down the line, you're like, this job isn't for me, it's going to be much easier to find that next job than if you didn't have that job at all. So yeah, I guess don't be too picky. Congrats on 100K subs. Hey, I appreciate it. And I see you commenting all the time and from like almost the very beginning. So I appreciate the support. How can I freelance as a CS student who learned HTML, CSS, and some JavaScript, as well as I'm learning C from university currently? Freelance is tough because getting those first clients is so difficult. So you could go the route of like Fiverr or Upwork. Disclaimer: I've worked with Fiverr in the past. This is not obviously sponsored by Fiverr, but you could go that route. Unfortunately, the result of going that route is, unless you're somebody with a lot of experience, the going rate of people on those sites is very low because the majority of the work is coming internationally, from places where where wages just tend to be a lot lower. So there's just so much competition that it drives the price of labor way down. So that is the downside of that. But if you're just trying to get some experience doing it, I think that can be a good way. Other than that, you could try, like, if you know anybody who has some little small business, even if you do some work for free for them, it can be at least like a resume builder, and it can be an example to show future people that you can actually do something. So oftentimes the first thing you do, you have to do for free or at a huge discount so that you can have a portfolio to show people. So if you have like friends with businesses, things like that, that could be a good starting point, and maybe they pay you a little bit for it, but it's probably going to be like below the market rate. Yeah, other than that, it's pretty hard, to be honest. Like, I don't have a great answer for you. Like, you could reach out to local businesses. Like, you say you're in university currently. So one thing you could do is like go to or look at all the like businesses around your university and go to their websites and things like that and see. I'm sure there's a lot of them that cater to the university, but have just like horrible websites and things like that. So maybe go to them and offer to build them a website, and maybe something like that'll work. But again, like it's going to be difficult. If you're doing it as a way to build experience, I think that's possible. If you're doing it as a way to build an income, it's going to be very difficult, and it's going to be a pretty long road. And I don't know that I'm the best person to answer it if that's your goal, because I've never built a very substantial freelance business. All right. Angular or React, what do you think is demanding for the job market? So which one's more in demand is absolutely React. It can vary a little bit by the industry you're looking at, by the country you're in, or even what part of a specific country you're in. So like in the US, it can vary a little bit. But generally speaking, React is much more popular than Angular, at least right now. Will that always be the case? I don't know. I think it probably will be for a very long time, but I don't know. And that's not to say there's no jobs in Angular, because there absolutely are. How is it to become a video game dev compared to web dev, as I'm really interested in game dev more than web dev? Is that usually taught in college curriculums? Yeah, so is it taught in college curriculums? No, usually not. It might be an elective at some universities, but generally speaking, a computer science degree is not teaching game development. That said, a computer science degree is also not teaching web development. Now, almost every university has a web development elective, but it's very rare that a computer science degree requires web development either, because they're teaching computer science, which is it's a science, right? Like, it is the science of like how computers work and things like that. So they're not really teaching any specific forms of software development. That's sort of just a thing that you build the skill of by virtue of doing computer science. And I would argue that any computer science graduate would be at least mostly qualified for a game development type of role, because at the end of the day, it's still just coding. There's obviously a lot more to game development, but the role of the actual developer, I would imagine, unless you're doing like super small indie stuff, or you're going to be also building like 3D models and stuff, I would imagine the roles you're looking at are mostly coding, software development type roles, in which case you're still qualified by virtue of the CS degree. You'll maybe just have a bit of a learning curve. But that said, there are also programs specific to game development. So there are some universities that have game development degrees, or that have computer science degrees where you can get a focus in game development. So maybe that is something to look into. Granted, there's not a ton of them out there, but I do know they do exist. So that could be a route to go. So I would say the possible routes are either just go get a computer science degree and then apply to game development companies. That's probably the route most people end up taking. And maybe while you're doing that computer science degree, just like go to some hackathons and build some games, play around with Unity and Unreal Engine and whatever else, and just learn a little bit on the side, maybe take some like online courses or whatever. And then The other route is go get a degree specific to game development, which they exist, but there's just not quite as many of them. Happy to see this friendly, helpful dude achieve success. Hey, appreciate it, Josh. I hope you're doing well. For those of you who don't know, Josh is the instructor, algo expert on the iOS expert course. All right. Do you think front-end junior positions will still be in demand? Yes. Unequivocally, yes. Are they as in demand right now as they were 5 years ago? No, but nothing is. But what I always say about this idea of like, so I guess there's two questions here, and they're kind of being combined. Are front-end roles still in demand, and are junior developer roles still in demand? So starting with front-end, a lot of people seem to think of front-end as the easier part of software development, and I don't actually think that's true. The reason it sort of gets that tag sometimes is because it does have the lowest barrier to entry by virtue of it's what a lot of coding boot camps teach. It's what a lot of online courses focus on. It's just the easiest to start with. Oftentimes there's a lot less tooling you need, things like that, right? That said, easiest to learn, possibly hardest to master. So there's that side to it where it's arguably the part of software development that's going to be one of the hardest to become very, very good at. It's one of the fastest in terms of how quickly it's changing, and those types of things can help you maintain a career by being ahead of that curve. Also, on the AI front, AI is a fear a lot of people have, right? And I've been pretty outspoken that I don't think AI is taking anybody's jobs anytime soon, but front-end development specifically, we talk about computers as being good at logic, right? And I think that's the reasoning a lot of people say, oh, computers should be good at coding because they're good at logic. And what is front-end development compared to the rest of coding jobs, right? It is like objectively the most creative of the coding jobs. It is the least logic heavy of the coding jobs. It's still a very logic heavy field, but the least so of the different roles, right? Front end, back end, etc. Front end is going to be the most creative by virtue of just like it is building user interfaces, right? So by that metric, I would argue that front end development is probably the hardest for AI to be able to replace, because AI is never going to be able to fully understand like human emotion and how humans interact with user interfaces. I mean, maybe like theoretically it could get very good at it, but I think that's something that's sort of inherently human. So yeah, that would be my answer on the front end side. And on the junior side, what would happen, hypothetically speaking, if we hired no junior developers? What happens in 10 years? All the senior developers have started retiring. The mid-level developers have become senior developers. So now we have only senior developers, and we don't have very many of them. And we need new mid-level developers, but we never hired any junior developers. So who do we promote? Nobody, because we don't have anybody. We could hire elsewhere, but nobody else hired any junior developers, so there are none. Well, guess we have to start hiring people with less experience again because we don't have anybody else to hire. And what do we call those? We call those junior developers. This idea that like the only jobs that exist are for senior developers, there might be an ounce of truth to it right now. Like the job market is much better for senior developers right now than other positions. And it's still not great for them either, but it's better for them than it is for like junior positions. But that's not sustainable. It's not something that, and it's not sustainable for like 10 years. I don't think it's sustainable, like even in like a short to medium term. So I don't think it'll last very long. Yeah. Our iOS expert is coming in to answer a question from earlier. Mac apps do use similar APIs to iOS apps. Okay, cool. Good to know. How do you get data analyst jobs in the US-based companies? I mean, I don't know anything specific to data analyst jobs, but same way you get any other job, website or any portal. I'd say LinkedIn and Indeed are probably the best places to look. How to break into more niche developer fields, building web frameworks or game engines. Frankly, I think it's just like apply to the companies that do those things. I don't think there's much more to it. Like, I don't think they're actually that much more niche. Like, if you apply to Unity or you apply to Unreal Engine or you apply, is Unreal the name of the company, or is it, I don't, is there a different company that makes it? Doesn't like Riot or somebody own Unreal? Either way, if you apply to one of those companies or you apply to like whatever web framework company, like if you apply to like work at Vercel or something, you're just by virtue of applying to those companies going to be working on those things and getting that experience. Of course, you could try building some side project of doing something similar. So like make your own web framework. It's actually not as insanely complicated as it sounds. To like do that as a side project and put that on your resume when you apply to a company like Vercel, and that could be helpful. Congrats on 100K. I discovered your channel long ago and always thought you deserve a lot more subs and views. I appreciate it. Your content is very informative. Thank you. Appreciate that. It's easy to go from web dev to software dev. It is as easy as it gets because web development is software development. It is just a subfield within software development. How to get remote jobs? Apply to them. I don't think there's anything unique about getting a remote job compared to other jobs, other than they're probably more competitive to get because a lot of people want them. But same way any other job, you apply, you study for the coding interviews, you get a good resume, all that stuff. What would you say are actually useful side projects that can help land a job? Does making a game with Godot help? Doing any project helps. Do things that are interesting to you. The more interesting it is to you, the more likely you are to actually work on it and to actually make it good. So I'd say number one, just find something that's actually interesting to you, and do things that align with the types of jobs you're trying to get. If you're trying to get a job at Google, is making a game going to be helpful? I mean, maybe a little bit. It's better than nothing. But on the other hand, if you're applying to a game company, then making a game is very useful, right? So do things that align with what's interesting to you and align with the companies that you're applying to, and just try to be at least somewhat unique. All right, enjoy education. Let's not spam the chat. I'm just now seeing this, but I don't know if these are all the same question or different questions. If they're all the same, stop. Can I get an iPhone of any model? Ask me anything does not mean get me anything, so no. Congratulations. I've been prepping for front-end interviews lately, and your JavaScript videos have been very useful. Hey, appreciate it. I'm glad that they are useful. Let's see. Have you ever thought about giving advice sessions to private groups? Focus on 2 to 3 types of sessions: professional career guidance, system design. I've thought about it. I've done a little bit of like one-on-one consulting before. So frankly, the issue is this: for any business transaction, right? There is a value that there's 2 values, right? There's the value to the business and there's the value to the customer, right? So in this case, I am the business and I have some amount I value my time at, right? In the same way that like, if I'm a restaurant, there's some amount that I value my food at, right? There's a minimum it costs me to produce that. In this case, the cost is just my time, but there's some value to that. And then there's the value that the consumer has, right? Like how much are they willing to pay for it? And if those 2 things don't overlap, then there's no business. And to be frank, I don't think the amount I would have to charge for my time to make it worth my while is equivalent to the amount of value I can provide to people. And maybe there's a world where I figure that out and there's like a way to format that to where that value is there. But I'm just not comfortable charging people more than something's worth because that's what my time feels like it's worth to me, if that makes sense. So like, if I wouldn't recommend to somebody to go through a thing that I made, I'm not going to make that thing. And I would not recommend somebody to pay as much as I would have to charge for like career guidance or something like that. So it's not something I'd charge for, if that makes sense. All right. You are in timeout. That's a fun feature on YouTube. I like that it calls it timeout. Let's see. Ever thought about starting a SaaS business? When did SaaS become like this like buzzword term of like it's like the new affiliate marketing, Amazon FBA, whatever else people sell, drop shipping. Now we start SaaS businesses. I don't know. I guess I think a lot about starting various businesses. I don't think about them in terms of, oh, this is a SaaS business or I'm going to start a SaaS business. I think of it in terms of I'm going to start a business and that business happens to be a software as a service. Maybe you could argue that front-end expert is a software as a service. I don't know. I don't even know really what defines something as a SaaS. So maybe, I guess so. I think a lot about starting businesses and I want to start more. Do I think a lot about like SaaS businesses specifically? No. At least I don't think about them in terms of like categorization like that. But I don't know. Maybe that's the wrong way to think about things. Tips for hiring manager rounds in big tech companies. It's a good question. Hold on. Tips for hiring manager rounds in big tech companies. I think it depends on what the hiring manager round is. It can vary by company to company. Some of them are somewhat technical interviews, and some of them are like just a chat. So the first thing is figure out what exactly it is. If it's the technical interview, it's just like any other technical interview. Although I would say focus even more on communication in those interviews than any other interview. If it's the chat, I would say just have kind of stories prepared. If you go to, actually, I guess I can pull it up on Algo Expert, shameless plug, although I have effectively no incentive to go into this, and I think it's free. I'm not even going to show it if it's not free. How about that? Is this free? Where'd it go? Bonus. Aha. Oh, it's not free. All right, I won't show it then. Never mind. So I was going to say, well, if you do have Algo Expert, there's a bonus on Algo Expert that is behavioral interview prep, and it has a bunch of example questions and answers that Clement did. And I think those behavioral interview questions are pretty common in that hiring manager round. So that can be a route to go. But regardless, just focus on having good answers to all those different common behavioral questions, like the type of questions that are, what is a time you had a disagreement with your team? Or what is a time that you caused a bug and how did you go about fixing it? Questions like that. Have answers to those and just like be prepared, understand the company you're applying to, like learn about what that the company values. It's like, what's the mission of the company? What are like the core values of the company? Things like that. Like Amazon is like the leadership principles. It's like if you're doing a hiring manager round, Amazon, you should probably be familiar with those principles. All right. Do you think the web dev field is getting oversaturated, or do you think the web dev field getting oversaturated would affect jobs for freshers or new grads? I find it very interesting. The word freshers is like a thing I know in India and some other places, but in the US, you like never hear it. If yes, then give some advice on how to tackle this. Maybe a little bit, but I would say, well, one, I don't think it's oversaturated. I think it's objectively not, because oversaturated would imply that there are more people than there are jobs. And it might seem like that's true because it's very hard to get a job. But if that was objectively true, like Econ 101 would say that the cost of labor would come down significantly because of supply and demand, and that's not happening. So I don't think there's actually an oversaturation. I think there's a lot of people applying for jobs right now, but I wouldn't go as far as calling it an oversaturation. I would just say it's more saturated than it was like 5 years ago. That said, does it affect jobs? Sure. Advice on how to tackle it: just know that you can't control the market. The market is what the market is. And you got to just keep pushing through and applying. You'll probably have to apply. The more saturated it gets, the more jobs you'll have to apply to, the more you'll have to stand out. So the better you need to get at coding interviews, the better resume you need to have. But Like, you can't control the market, so I don't think it's worth overthinking about. I already answered this. I know basics, object-oriented programming, data structures, databases, C#. I can build my own SaaS. Oh, we're back to building SaaSes. What's the minimum knowledge to build? Minimum knowledge to build what? I don't know. Oh, Epic Games owns it. I was close. I knew it was some game company owned it. Congrats on 100K. Been here since day one? Day one? I think on day one I had... It's funny. People talk, or not talk a lot, but like I've seen comments a few times, not that often, but I've seen them a couple times where somebody will attribute like all of my success on YouTube to that collab with Clement on day one. And I attribute a good amount to it. I'm super appreciative of him for doing that and all of that. But it's kind of funny because I think I gained like less than 500 subs that day, which is a lot. Like most people start at 0. I started at like 500. But day one's crazy. That was a long time ago. When did you feel you became a senior dev, and how was it for you to feel the difference? I don't know that I ever felt that because I wasn't a developer that very long. I worked at Facebook for a little bit over a year. So like I was never like... I think you become a senior dev when you get promoted to senior developer, which I never was because I quit before I could have been promoted to it. Like if I applied to a job right now, I would apply as a senior. I would not take a non-senior role anymore. But I never like actually worked as a senior developer. So I guess I never felt that. I don't know. All right, you're in timeout again. You got to stop spamming. Enjoy education. All right. I have terrible imposter syndrome, and even thinking about applying to programming jobs feels like a huge wall. Yet I really want to break into this field. So first of all, I mean, there's not that. This isn't a question, so there's not that much I can really say, but know that everybody feels the imposter syndrome, or pretty much everybody, most people. So you're not alone in that, and it does get easier, but you kind of just got to do it. Yeah, know that you're not alone. No matter how much you think everybody around you knows, they know less, and however much you think you know more. And it tends to be the truth for most people. Yeah, I have a video on my channel. It didn't do very well, but I think it's a good video. It's an interview with a woman who is the founder of the, what's it called? The Imposter Syndrome Institute, I think. And it's a really good interview on like imposter syndrome and dealing with it in tech. So if you haven't seen that, maybe shameless plug, but maybe give that a watch. I enjoy programming and made a project for a pharmacy to use, but still don't believe in my actual skills for an actual corporate job. Nobody does when they first start their job. And frankly, nobody actually has the skills for it either. And that's fine. Like, they teach you how to get a remote job, same way as any other job. Apply to it and build a good resume. Work in coding interviews, get good at them, apply to as many as you can. It's going to be more competitive than other jobs because remote jobs are more desirable, but same as any other job. Thoughts on Upwork versus Fiverr? Have you used any of these? So it's hard for me to answer this. So I've never used Upwork, but I've done multiple videos with Fiverr as a sponsor. So I don't know that I can answer this in a purely unbiased way because I've never used one of them, and the other I've used through sponsorships. But I will say I do use Fiverr outside of sponsored videos. I have, on multiple occasions before I ever worked with the company, paid for things on Fiverr, and I've always gotten pretty good results from it. I've never used Upwork, but I've had good results with Fiverr. If you mean being a freelancer on there, I've never done it on either, though. Yeah. Do you still feel the need to seek and continue to learn new stuff on a daily basis to keep with the state of art in the software world? No. not really. I don't think I ever felt that. I think the idea that you have to feel that is uh, incorrect. I think a lot of people do feel that, but I don't know. I need to keep up with whatever I need to know to do my job, and I am confident enough in my like fundamental skills in computer science and software development that if I need to learn some new fancy tech, that I can go learn the new fancy tech. But I'm not going to spend all day thinking about learning the new fancy tech when I don't even need it. Here's a behavioral interview tip. Google the company's values, come up with an example of how you demonstrated each value. Ooh, I like that, Josh. That's a good one. So yeah, to whoever asked about behavioral interviews, do that. Good one. Facts. All right. Would love to see you do more quizzes like the hardest JavaScript quiz you did a while ago. If you have any for me to do, send them to me. I'll do more of them. I think they're fun. I just don't know of any others. I tried what's it called? Sporkle, but they're not very good. Most of them were made like a decade ago, and like, yeah, they're not great. All right. Enjoy Education has been banned. Everybody. Yeah, if you do have any of those quizzes for me to do, comment them somewhere, and maybe I'll do them. They're pretty fun, and the videos always do well. And like, frankly, they're super easy videos to make. Like the one that Prime reacted to, that's probably the best performing one. Like literally took me 30 minutes. Like it was like 20 minutes to film the video and like 10 minutes to edit it. So like it's like no work. So those videos are great. Big fan of those. And they're fun. How to get good at open source contribution, aiming for an upcoming open source programs. I have never done much open source contributions or open source contributing, so I don't think I'm the best person to answer this. Yeah, I don't know the answer to this other than just like get started with it, do it. There are some open source repositories that are going to be more newbie friendly than others, and there are some that explicitly have some issues that they mark as beginner friendly. So I would say go to some of those and try to do some of those beginner friendly issues. But yeah, maybe somebody else has better advice for you here because it's not something I've done much of. The doom and gloom is crazy, and I'm in CS makes it hard to not reconsider. So here's what I'd say if you're reconsidering computer science, which is fair. Like nothing wrong with that. If you decide to go a different route, I have no incentive for you to do one or the other, right? Like it frankly does not matter all that much to me if you do computer science or you do something else, right? Like I just want you to do what's ever best for you. But this is what I will say. Look to whatever fields you are otherwise considering. Usually for computer science students, it's other engineering fields, but maybe it's something completely different. Look to those fields. And don't say, what is the current sentiment around those? I don't think it's that important. Look at it and say, which one of these at this current moment has better job prospects? Which one of these will I make more money? Which one of these will I have a more comfortable job, better benefits, all those types of things? Which one will I find a job faster? And it's easy to look at computer science and say, well, it's gotten a lot worse, which I think there's some truth to that. Not as much as people say, but there's definitely truth to it. But so have the other fields, like so have other engineering fields to some extent. And computer science was so much better for so much longer that even if it's gotten like 10, 20, 30, 50, 60% worse, it might still be better, right? Like when I graduated in 2020, it was not uncommon for students in my graduating class, granted I went to a very good school and all of that, to make anywhere from like 150 to 250, sometimes even more as a new grad out of college. Whereas pretty much every other engineering field was like right around 100K, maybe like 120, 140, and there were a few that could get a little bit higher. So like it's like computer science was so much better, right? Is it still that much better? Maybe not. Is it still better or equivalent to the other engineering fields? I would say so in most cases. Of course, I would also say, though, don't choose it just because it has the best job prospects or good job prospects or any of that. Go the route of whatever is most interesting to you, with the caveat of interesting to you and can also be a career. But if that's any engineering field or some STEM field, it's probably a fine career to take. And the difference of making 100K and 150K is a lot, but it's good money regardless, right? The bigger difference is which thing are you going to enjoy doing 8 hours a day? Okay. Do you think contributing to open source is a must these days, as there seems to be more and more people faking contributions? No, I don't think it's a must. I don't think it's ever been. I don't think it ever will be. I think more developers than not have never made a single open source contribution in their lives. I recently entered my final semester and I'm supposed to do a 6-month internship. Any tips on how to apply to at least get an interview, because I'm getting an interview is very difficult. Yeah, so if you're not getting interviews, one of two things is happening. Either one, you're not applying to enough places, right? Like I've seen sometimes people are like, I'm not getting any interviews. I'm like, where'd you apply? And they give me a list of 2 companies. I'm like, well, apply to more. Or the other thing that's happening is the resume is not good enough, right? Because that is the thing that screens to get an interview. So if you're not applying to enough, apply to more. And if you have applied to a lot and you're not getting any interviews, work on your resume. So work on your resume could mean 2 things. One, it could be building things to put on your resume, so building projects, or it could mean just improving the actual document itself by going and getting feedback, preferably from people who are in the industry, but getting feedback from somebody who's going to be critical of it and help you make it a better document. Yeah. Is making JavaScript apps via Electron worth exploring? It can be. If you want to make desktop apps with JavaScript, I think it's a fine way to do it. Some people don't like it because of like performance concerns and stuff, but yeah, I think it can be good. Do you still need to create ATS styled resumes? Can you share an example of one of these days on YouTube? On how you would go about creating one. So by ATS styled, you just mean something that's going to like pass a scanner. I would say yes. You should always make sure your resume is scannable. So the way I do this is super low fidelity and probably not the best. There's tools online that are probably better. But a very easy way to do it is export your resume as a PDF, because that's how it's going to be viewed. And then open the PDF if you're on Mac and like Preview, if you're on Windows and I don't know, whatever the PDF viewer thing is called. And then just open it up, Command or Control A and Command or Control C. So copy everything from it and then open a Notes app. So not like Microsoft Word, not Google Docs, a simple Notes app. So on Mac, open the actual Notes app. On PC, open Notepad and paste the whole thing in there and see if it's still in a readable format. It's not going to be perfect because you just pasted from a PDF into a Notepad, but make sure that nothing's like completely out of order or impossible to read. If it is, it's not going to be scannable, most likely. And if it is in the correct order and still readable, then it's probably going to be fine. So that's like my super low fidelity way to do it. What programming languages do you use in your daily job, and do you work as a... So shout out to y'all for 100,000 subs, because my daily job is sitting here and making YouTube videos. I do this full time at this point. So languages I use whatever I'm using for a video. But yeah, the vast majority of my work time is focused on YouTube at this point. So yeah, Let's see, would you create something in pure HTML, CSS, HTML, JavaScript, CSS, Express.js? Are you asking me to, or are you asking me if I think it's a good idea? If you're asking me to, maybe, probably not. I probably not. If I think it's a good idea, it can be. It depends on what the purpose is. I do think oftentimes libraries and frameworks are overused. A lot of things just don't need them. But just depends what you're doing. What inspired you to be a YouTuber? Honestly, I've been obsessed with YouTube like my whole life. If you asked me they say now that like if you ask kids what they want to do when they grow up, the most common answer is they want to be a YouTuber or streamer or some kind of like influencer. And granted, I don't think many of them are saying they want to make videos about software engineering, but close enough. I think I might have been like the first kid to say that. Like that's what I was obsessed with YouTube as a little kid. Or maybe not that little because YouTube wasn't around when I was like tiny, but I've been obsessed with YouTube forever. I've always wanted to do it. I was frankly kind of scared to do it. So when I worked at Facebook, I thought about it for a while. And I had a very cushy job. And I was kind of worried. I didn't know if that was something that the company would approve of. I didn't know what would happen. I was worried about like the social ramifications, like what would people say? So I didn't do it for a long time. And then I got the opportunity to leave Facebook and join Algo Expert, which obviously meant working with Clement, who, if you don't know Clement, he has a large YouTube channel in the space. So that made it much easier because now it was like, okay, I can point to this and be like, this is why I'm doing this, right? Like this is clearly good for our business of building the front-end expert platform. And also look at this person I'm working with who's clearly demonstrated how successful YouTube can be. And it also gave me more confidence in myself doing it, in that I had people like him who I could go to for advice and also that I could collab with and help grow the channel. So inspired wise, I would say I've always wanted to do it. Like straight up, I probably watch like 3 to 5 hours of YouTube videos every single day. And I have most of my life. Market research, I'm working. Like it's my TV. But in terms of like what actually gave me the confidence to do it, I would say joining Algo Expert and Clement, especially. And I guess to some extent also Tim. Thanks for your insight. I'm aiming for like an even realistic 60K job and work from there. You know, I wanted to go into med school originally, then pivoted at my junior year. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a good like perspective to have. Perspective isn't the right word. It's a good like, I'll go with perspective because I can't think of a better word. I think a lot of people have this conception of I'm going to go get a computer science degree and I'm going to get a job making 200 grand a year at Google and it's going to be great. And that can happen. And I don't want to discourage people, but at the same time, like be reasonable with yourself. And I think being realistic is good. Because like, yeah, you can work from there and it's a better starting salary than you would get from most degrees and probably a much cushier job and much more upside. Yeah. But also apply to those jobs at Google, etc. And if you happen to get one making 6 figures, multiple 6 figures, even better. Thanks for your advice. Appreciate it. Hey, appreciate you. Do you enjoy making videos? What are your plans for the future of the channel? Ooh, I do. It's fun. I'll say there's things I don't enjoy, and I think that's the case for anything. When your hobbies become your job, there will always be things that you start to dislike about your hobbies that you previously did not dislike. So yeah, there's definitely aspects of it I don't enjoy, but overall, yeah, it's super fun. I'm like insanely grateful that I get to do this for a living. So yeah, I enjoy it. Future plans, I don't know. That's something I've been thinking about a lot because I don't know what exactly I want this channel to be. And I'm not sure that it has like a super strong identity. Like most of the channels in the tech niche have a very strong identity, right? So like, for example, Clement is sort of the coding interview guy and the market guy and business guy. Tim is sort of the tutorial guy, uh, especially with like Python, but tutorials in general. Someone like Web Dev Simplified is sort of like the JavaScript tutorial guy. Somebody like Fireship is sort of the entertainment, funny, like his production value is so different. I don't even know how to like describe his videos, but also doing like these like market updates and like, but like in an entertaining way type of guy, right? And uh, there's all these different channels that have like these like specific sub niches and like things they're focusing on. And I'm not sure that like I found yet what exactly I want that to be for me. Like up until this point, I've kind of just made videos that I found interesting. So I'm still trying to figure out what exactly that will be. And that will be the future of the channel. But I don't know the answer exactly. All right. Do most companies actually enforce the whole NDA thing? I've worked on some stuff, really big projects in telecoms and AI, but I can't add it to my resume because NDA stuff. Or is there an... Yeah. This is an interesting question. So I'm not a lawyer, but I would not advise you to violate an NDA. That said, to answer the question of do most companies enforce it, some do, some don't. I think it depends on how egregious the violation is, right? Like if you went on TikTok and started talking about whatever's in the NDA, they're probably going to sue you. I mean, I don't know what the company is, but like good chance, right? Versus it being like on your resume is probably a much smaller chance. But one thing I have done before, so I did this a few times, is I've just asked old managers, assuming you have a good relationship with them, like, yo, can I put this on my resume? And if they say no, I've honored that. And if they said yes, then it's all good. And I've had times where they've been like, were things I thought I wasn't allowed to say publicly for my resume. They're like, yeah, it's not a big deal. So you could do that. You could also try to word it in a way that's a little bit vague, but I don't know the specifics of it. So you could try to word it in a way that just doesn't violate that NDA. But it's hard for me to know because I don't know what's in that NDA. Would you like to work at a FANG company again if possible? I mean, maybe one day, but I have no desire at this moment to work as a full-time software engineer anytime soon, or full-time anything anytime soon, other than this. If possible, I think it's objectively possible. Honestly, I think if I wanted, they made it clear when I left Facebook that if I wanted to come back, I could. Granted, it's been like 3 years now, so I don't know if that. I would assume that door is probably still mostly open. I'd have to interview again, but I've done coding interviews for a living for multiple years, so I would hope I'm good at coding interviews now. So yeah, I don't think I'd have a problem getting a job. Maybe that's just me being overly confident, but I think I'd be able to get one pretty easily. But would I want to? Probably not. Not anytime soon. Maybe one day. I wouldn't say no. I enjoyed my job, but at the moment I'm enjoying this more. You still work at Algo Expert? Yes and no. So yes, I guess. So I never worked there as like a full-time like 9 to 5 employee. That was never my like agreement to them. So I never left. I'm still involved in the sense that like front-end expert still exists. They still pay me for it. But I'm not like doing stuff on a day-to-day basis there. There's not like new work being done on front-end expert. Every now and then people ask me like, what's the next thing going to be released? Like, frankly, I don't know if there will be anytime soon or ever for that matter. Like it's kind of a done product. So yeah, I'm not like actively doing much with Algo Expert. Like but I'm still there, if that makes sense. But congrats. All questions are good questions. There are no selfish questions, and appreciate it. What do you think of front-end testing, not low-level unit testing? Sometimes it feels a bit cumbersome to UI test when something is quickly evolving and changing. I mean, I don't know. It is what it is. I think oftentimes people over-test. There's this idea that like if something's not tested, it's bad software development. And sometimes things just don't need to be tested, right? Like some pieces of UI, it's just not worth the time to test them. But there's other pieces that are very mission critical and need to be tested, and go write the test. I don't know. I don't really have much more opinion than that. Tips for somebody who wants to be a web dev in 1 year. So I don't know exactly what your current position is in life. I don't know where you are at in this. So it's hard for me to answer that question. But I would say, generally speaking, build a plan and follow that plan. That plan could be going to a coding bootcamp. That plan could be going to a university, although it's not going to happen in 1 year. That plan could be self-teaching even. But find a plan and stick to it. And also try to find somebody else who has followed that plan or a very similar plan to validate that it is a good plan, that it is a plan that will actually work. And I also would say don't be too stuck on this idea of it being exactly 1 year. That is possible, but also very ambitious, especially in this current job market. I think you can be employable as a web dev in 1 year. Can you necessarily be employed in 1 year? That's going to be much more difficult. Not saying it's impossible, but difficult. Would you like to break into streaming alongside YouTube videos? I don't know. I've thought about it. I used to actually stream a lot on TikTok. A lot of people here don't know that. I used to stream like twice a week or so on TikTok, and it was fun. I'd do these like kind of like this, like AMAs. But I stopped doing it because the algorithm just stopped being very favorable to it. Like at one point I was averaging like 200 to 300 viewers at a time. And then randomly one day that went to like 50. And then another day it went to like 10. And then it was like, it became like, it didn't feel like it was worth the time. So maybe, although I think I'd want to do it in a different way. Like the AMAs are fun and I like doing them occasionally, but at some point you just start getting asked the same questions over and over again. And it's like, okay, this is why I make videos, so that there's an answer on demand rather than me having to answer the same question 1,000 times. So I don't think doing like AMA streams frequently makes sense. But I think there's other things that could be streamed that could be fun. Like I know Prime and Theo both stream like making their videos. I think they do at least, which is kind of interesting. So maybe I'd try that. Maybe I'd try streaming, like doing like a coding stream, but I don't even know what I would make. But I don't know, maybe one day we'll make a project together and stream it or something. So I'm like interested in it, but I don't know that I would ever commit to it as like a consistent scheduled thing. Because I don't know that I have enough stuff to stream, if that makes sense. And also just like from a business, like financial perspective, I'm not sure that it's a great use of my time. Like it probably isn't. At what point should a project just have been rebuilt instead of constantly being patched? I don't know. At whatever point the economics make sense, right? Like at what point is this project patching costing more developer time or potentially more value to consumers if the rebuild would be better than rebuilding it? And that is sort of the break-even point, right? All right. With that said, we made it to the bottom of the comments. So I think I'll leave it here. We've been live for almost an hour and a half. I think it's a good length. If you all enjoyed this, maybe we'll do it again at some point. I think it's kind of fun. This has been entertaining. I appreciate you all chatting, hanging out, asking questions. This would have been very boring and dull if there were no questions to answer. So I appreciate you all. And again, thank you for the 100K subs. Again, whether you've been here since literally day one, which I know a few of you have, or if you subscribed yesterday or even subscribed during this live stream, I appreciate you. It's humbling to be able to sit in my office or in my basement and just like talk to a camera and say that this is my job. So yeah, super grateful. And yeah, there'll be more videos soon, maybe more live streams soon. And if you're in the US and you happen to have today off, enjoy your day off. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day or your night, wherever you are in the world. And I'll see you all later.